You're listening to the Changing Normal podcast, where we strive to outdo the old normal and reject the new normal. And now your hosts, Owen, Dan, and Ben.
For my discussion on the topic, it's they don't think that Bitcoin is fungible because it's not private. So they say that sound money has to be private in order to be sound. It has to be anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So they say that Bitcoin is not anonymous, therefore it's not sound money. Because Pirate Chain does follow a lot of, the rules of sound money. They have a hard supply cap. They have, it's a proof of work crypto.
Right.
They have a lot of those sort of things. They've modeled it after Bitcoin, but they've added in this privacy aspect, which I don't think that's a bad thing, but people don't care about privacy in that respect. The majority of people who are doing the Bitcoin thing.
I don't know, because I do hear privacy talked about a lot in Bitcoin circles. So is it just that the momentum into privacy as a priority hasn't hit yet? Because we're still seeing just the number go up, jump on board, the bandwagon kind of craze.
Yeah, I don't think that we've got the people who are hardcore Bitcoiners in the back of their mind, they go, privacy is important. But they understand why Satoshi sacrificed privacy so that you could have a transparent blockchain and there can be no cheating on the blockchain. Mm-hmm. The majority of people, though, are in it for the number go up technology. Now, they don't all stay there. People get in, they learn, and they maybe change their philosophical view over time. But most of these people speculating on the price of Bitcoin who are in tech stocks, those people don't care about Bitcoin anonymity. They care about number go up. The retail investor at this point is very much in the minority.
Okay. So when does that change then? Like, at what point do we see more people getting into Bitcoin over or for the philosophical, sound money, store value principles versus the number go up phenomenon? Is that the decoupling from the stock market?
Could be. The people are pushed to that when they are forced to. Like, people will go that way because they're forced to.
Right.
Something has to happen in society, in the culture, in the news that that is driving people to that. And that's usually crisis. Like, that's some sort of time of crisis.
Right.
That drives people to that. And so people get in for lots of reasons, but in those times of crisis, people go, oh, I need a better money.
Mm-hmm.
When there's financial crisis. And so people will then turn to Bitcoin for those other reasons, not necessarily the money go up reasons.
Okay.
Or there's some kind of, like what you see in, Africa and places like that. People aren't buying Bitcoin for the number go up technology. They're buying Bitcoin because they don't have access to a bank.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to transact internationally and inside of their, local economies as well. And so for them, Bitcoin has that function that they need.
Well, that type of growth is definitely like the slow, sustainable type. it's not what gives you the huge surges. I think that's more the social media, everybody jumping on just because it's a bandwagon type thing. That's probably a lot of what we saw in early 2020.
Yeah. And I think that's why the altcoin thing has blown up so big on that point, because you occasionally hear, and I've actually had people say this to me. Oh, Bitcoin, that's boomer coin. That's old. Like that's you got to get these new coins because that's where it's at. These new blockchains, these new altcoins. That's where the market's going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's led a lot of people astray, probably. But getting back to the pirate chain versus Bitcoin kind of argument, we started this off with, I don't think that pirate chain goes up again until there is a crisis requiring anonymity. And then you're going to see a jump in those. There'll be some market flux, obviously, because they all, when things start going back up out of this bear market and go on a bull run, well, everything kind of goes the same.
Right.
Things go at slightly different rates, but you'll see something like Pirate Chain go back up, same as Monero will go up and what have you. But to actually get adoption, like Pirate Chain, it's going to take a serious concern in society about their privacy in order for people to really even look for something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because why would I use Pirate Chain over Bitcoin, practically speaking?
Well, you can be more confident that your transaction on Pirate Chain is invisible.
Yeah. But practically speaking, Bitcoin's faster. Like with the Lightning network. Mm-hmm. Now I know they say, oh, that's second layer. That's not even like Pirate Chain people are even against second layer Bitcoin. They're against Lightning. Mm-hmm. They won't engage you on that and that discussion. They want to only talk about Bitcoin main chain because that's where they can actually create some kind of an argument.
Well, what is their method for scaling up then? If they're opposed to a second layer,
they don't have
scale.
Yeah, they don't have this. From what I've seen, they don't have anything like that. There is no, but I've not delved too deeply into that or asked those questions since I left the group after the big. Oh yeah. Oh, I left the group. It was such a. Oh yeah. I couldn't take the lack of ability to even have a conversation without just insulting people. I couldn't take it. But anyway, I don't know of any plan by Pirate Chain to try and scale their product. Mm-hmm. So if Pirate Chain is the money of the world that we should all be using, how's it going to handle that? Can it handle that? Mm. Like, what's their block size? I don't even know what their block size is. I should look that up.
I'm aware of two methods of scaling up, and one is adding layers. The second one is simply scaling up your block size on the blockchain itself. So I think we've talked about this before, how maintaining a small block size is really essential to letting people run their own node and having a full copy of all transactions. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of difficult to just throw that out and say, well, we'll scale up the block size. So to me, a second layer is it's a really innovative solution to the difficulty.
Yeah, because
why just dismiss that out of hand?
That was the block size wars with Bitcoin, right? They tried to increase the size of the blockchain, presumably for scalability reasons. But I think now, if you, I can't remember if this was Ethereum. Maybe this was Ethereum I was thinking of. It would take 9 terabytes to hold the entire blockchain.
Smokes.
If you have a full, like a proper full node, not what Ethereum people call a full node, because it's not actually a full node anymore. They changed the terminology.
I can't find Pirate Chain's block size on their website. They just that their total number is going to be just under 200 million, so a hard cap. Block time is 60 seconds, and the reward halving occurs every 388,885 blocks, or about 270 days.
So they have a 60 second. Did you say a 60-second block time?
Yep, 60
Okay,
seconds.
so that's pretty fast. So the idea is technically without congestion on the network, a transaction could go through in 60 seconds or less, which is fast compared to Bitcoin main chain.
And the legacy payment system like Visa and MasterCard and stuff. Right. I had a couple Visa transactions this week that took almost 4 days to settle.
Yeah.
Because I got my ShakePay card back. Ooh, yeah.
They have physical cards now?
No, I don't know
No.
what happened. My NFC just started working again on my phone.
I see. I just mean the NFC.
That's weird.
function.
I must have dropped it hard enough or something. Sure. It's all shook up.
Yeah. It's
Oh, I
back
just
to the
took-
old style electronics where you just give it a bang.
I almost broke into my Elvis impression there.
Well, you can't tease that.
Oh dear.
All right. What are we up to? We just gonna launch right into things now that we already
I was
spent
gonna
15 minutes talking about Pirate Chain again.
Yeah, I'm not going to know what to do with this. Is this crypto corner? Is this the main topic? Is this an outtake? Is this a bonus cast? Oh, you guys just going to make me edit.
Introduce the show.
All I could hear
10-minute cold opening.
was a Rogan episode right there. Right?
Yeah.
Just like it just rolls from intro and right into the show.
Yeah. All right. Well, I haven't even started a watch, so this will be interesting to try and figure out how to edit this. I think you guys just want me to do lots of editing.
No. Raw footage. It's all good stuff.
All right. Well,
This is episode 19.
Yeah.
for anyone who cares.
This is the Changing Normal podcast. We're on episode
19
Episode
and a half. 19 and a half, because we already talked about it, the first half. Anyway.
September 8th.
Go ahead, Ben. Let's actually start the show.
Oh, boy. Hey, folks. Welcome back. This is the Changing Normal podcast. We're on episode 19. Today is September the 8th, and I'm your host, Segway. I'm here with my co-hosts, Owen and Dan. We've been having a little bit of chit-chat so far about what this episode is going to be, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a surprise to us as well as you. So stick around, you might learn something, or you could just be entertained for a couple of hours.
We might learn something too.
It's true. What we're going to do next week, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Guys, what have you been up to? Owen, how's your week been?
Well, pretty good. I've been working a lot, so haven't been able to do much, but I utilized my second vehicle kit tonight. Had a flat tire in my truck, or it wasn't completely flat. It was just a leak that I was able to identify where it was coming from. So I pulled up my plug kit, and 2 minutes later had the hole plugged in the tire.
Nice.
So that was handy. Also been pretty heavy into my hops harvest. So that's been surprising how long it's taking me.
Really?
Yeah.
I know nothing about them.
Well, I mean, they grow very
used in beer.
Yeah, well, they grow very tall. So I've got 12-foot poles with 6 wires coming off the poles, sort of down like a sort of a tall tent,
right?
Kind of a look. And then I have one plant planted at the bottom of each of those wires.
Okay.
So they all grow up to the top and then continue growing and kind of just flop back down over on themselves and start growing back down the wires. They are loaded this year. I've taken, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've taken 5.5 apple baskets so far off of 2 poles, and I'm still not finished the second pole.
Holy smokes.
So I'm going to have probably another 2 or 3 baskets off that pole, and then I have a third pole that's loaded that I haven't even started yet. So
do you preserve those, or what are you going to do with all that?
Well, I'm probably going to sell a bunch of it just to somebody who's interested in using it. This is really a test year for me. So you normally would dry them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just laying them out in the greenhouse, on the bench in the greenhouse to sort of dry them, because there's too much volume for me to handle in a dehydrator or something like that.
Right.
I think I may have over dried the first bunch I did. They stayed maybe a couple days too long in the greenhouse because they opened up. They're sort of built like a pine cone. They look like a little soft green pine cone. And so they opened up quite a bit, and a lot of the oily pollen in them that gives them the flavor fell out.
Okay.
So I don't know. I might have overdone those. So the second batch I took off a little sooner. I guess it just depends on the day and how hot it is and all of that, right? On how fast they dry. So I kind of have to just watch them. Tonight it was kind of sprinkling, raining a little bit when I got home, so I didn't get any more picked. But they're starting to actually dry on the vine. So they're going to be too far gone. I'm worried. So that's why I'm trying to get them off. Because they can actually get overripe and not taste as good.
Right on.
So anyway, I've been trying to kind of figure that all out, and I'm going to take them, dry them, then I'll package them up and vacuum pack them down, and then I can put them in the freezer. They say keeping them in the freezer is the best way. They're very lightweight, so it's a lot of volume for very little weight. So usually when you utilize hops, you do it by the ounce. And most commonly you'll get, like if you go to a commercial, like a store or a beer store or whatever, and you buy hops just by itself, you'll get a little tiny package of hop pellets. They pelletize it commercially. And then it's very concentrated, of course, and you just throw, maybe only a couple ounces in a batch of beer or whatever you're doing with it.
Right.
And so, but a couple ounces of non-pelletized dry hop flour is like that much. Like it's quite a bit of volume. So yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to figure out kind of like what I want to keep, maybe what my dad wants to keep. And then I'll probably just throw the rest of them up on a local classified site and be like, hey, anybody around here make beer and want some locally grown hops to play with? And, not going to make a whole ton of money on it, but someone will utilize it at least. And then next year, I'm thinking I'm going to start advertising a little bit ahead if I have another good harvest, and be like, then post ahead of time and say, does anybody want the experience of hand picking your own hops to make your beer out of You know, and then I can just basically get people to come pick it, and I don't have to pick it.
I accept Pirate Chain in payment.
That's right, exactly. No, I'm starting my own token. It's going to be called Hopcoin.
Hopcoin. That'll be a good lead into a.
What's that?
That'll be a good lead into a cute animal as your, your meme token.
That's right. There'll be a rabbit.
No.
There'll be a rabbit on the for the graphic. Hopcoin. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I think there's a study that looked into that and found the altcoins that did the best had an animal as their.
Oh, really? Well, there.
As their whatever.
It's all marketing, right?
Yeah.
Literally all
people will
marketing.
just buy it because it's a cute dog sketch, despite the fact that it was copy pasted from some other altcoin.
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't a fan of when Algorand started getting their own kind of coins rolling, like on their platform, similar to how like Ethereum has the ERC20 tokens, and excuse me, Algorand started, at least with the Yieldly staking platform. They had some like algo kittens, things like that sort of deal. It's just like, man, guys, come on. But I mean, they do strive to be the greenest, most eco-friendly blockchain, period. So, but now that Ethereum is going to proof of stake versus proof of work, is supposed to cut their carbon footprint in half by like 99%, which is then going to, topple Bitcoin. Apparently. But anyway.
Yeah. I think we still need to do this crypto corner on proof of work versus proof of stake.
We'll just throw the Pirate Chain Bitcoin discussion in somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, Dan, what about you? How you been?
Crazy busy week. It is that time of year. So between dealing with chicken stuff and then dealing with all the harvest stuff, I haven't had time to advance any of my other projects. So it's just full steam ahead as long as the weather's good.
Right on. Cool beans.
What about you, Ben?
Well, it's been it was an interesting weekend. We have the Canadian Lumberjack Championships coming up in Mactaquac. So we had almost 100 blocks to lay out. So we got a full.
Did you make a blockchain?
Well, in literal definitions of the term, yes, we did. We had the massive pile of tree length logs, and then we chunked those up into 30-inch blocks, and then the 30-inch blocks got turned down with all the transactions by the wood lathe. And then to finalize it, we wrapped them and signed them.
Did any of those logs have forks in them?
No, we had to make sure. We had to make sure that all the forks got tossed.
Well, now those were those softwood forks or hardwood forks?
Most of it was hardwood.
Oh, hard forks. Okay.
But we did have a couple block expansions halfway through the chain where we had to turn the sawing wood, but then we rolled the chain back and we got everything back down to the hardwood forks.
Oh,
that's so much mudslinging at every cryptocurrency out there.
Oh dear.
But anyway, aside from that, we got all the wood ready for the championships. So that's just about ready to go. There's 30 competitors coming from all of northeastern North America, I think. Not sure if we have any American competitors coming, but bunch of people from Quebec and all the maritime provinces for the competition on the 17th. But aside from that, it's just, we went camping the last few days. Actually just got back a couple hours ago. Learned that I'm not quite as prepared to just grab and go as I would like to be, because showed up, we got halfway to the campsite and I'm thinking like, okay, we're going hiking. I forgot my water filtration stuff and my hydration stuff at home. And we're going to start making a fire. And I'm thinking, I don't have my hatchet or any of my fire building stuff. So, it was the old,
so you got it there with a two sticks rubbing it together.
No, I grabbed a lighter at the camp store, but got just using a knife and another block of wood to split things up into kindling and getting it into a manageable size for a fire. And anyway, but on the plus side, for some odd reason, my ShakePay card is working again on my phone. So I'm back to making purchases with the ShakePay card, getting sats back on that. And then the Shake Squad, I'm earning from the Shake Squad again. And then ShakePay just came out with their ShakePay Earn, which is essentially an annual percent return on the amount of Canadian dollars you have in your ShakePay account. So it's like a wait list, and then there's tiers based on who holds the most amount of money in their account, and then you earn a certain percentage based on what tier you're in. So anyway, it's just more sats to earn. So I was like, heck yes. And then I've also been in the process of unstaking my proof of stake coins like Atom and Algorand. What else? I guess I have DVPN, but that's for the VPN, so probably won't sell that. But I'm selling most of my other cryptos because why? Why would I hold them? I mean, we're gonna talk about proof of work and fiat and proof of stake. So basically the further I've gone down through this rabbit hole of Bitcoin, the more I've realized that Bitcoin is the best one. Sorry, part change. I mean, it's the king of cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's a cryptocurrency, but all cryptos are not. Anyway, that's aside from the fact. But at least as far as the functionality and what it can be utilized as, it's the one that I want to hang on to and at least spend time and money on. So, I've been working on figuring out how I'm going to do it. I mean, I'm basically realizing a massive loss with all of this. I guess the IRS is probably listening, or not the IRS, CIA. So I'm losing a lot of money, guys. But we had not much in the show notes, but you guys came up with proof of work versus fiat versus proof of stake. So, I mean, it's kind of fitting, with Ethereum moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So are we just looking to kind of compare, or are we looking at the ethics of them? Where are we going with this?
This is an open discussion.
Yeah. like the entire show so far.
Starting with a cold entrance.
Why don't we define them first off? So proof of work systems are all based around the idea of a problem that needs to be solved. And
Right.
Computers are basically working away trying to find the answer and basically checking, because they can easily verify their guesses as they run through different combinations. And so they just verify as many different solutions to the problem as possible. And basically the one that wins, that gets the answer in the shortest amount of time, gets to forge the next block.
Right.
So I think that's pretty much the basics of proof of work. But
basically, you have to make sure you understand. People have to understand that they're providing the proof of their work, and their work involves the consumption of energy to solve the problem.
Right.
So that's the work side of it, and that's an important distinction. I think is that consumption of energy is not the consumption of energy,
expenditure of energy.
The expenditure of energy, that is a important factor, I think, in this that we'll get into here later.
Yeah, well, it's also worth clarifying that the energy that's being expended is not to perform transactions on the blockchain.
Right.
So, because you'll even see that label. It's like each transaction on Bitcoin costs this much energy. And it's like, no, the transaction did not cause the expenditure of energy. The incentive to provide the solution is what causes expenditure of energy. People are interested in attempting to solve the problem. And the reason it's set up like that is to provide a decentralized means of securing and verifying the network. But if we contrast that with proof of stake, who's got a good grasp on how a proof of stake blockchain would work?
Oh man.
Well,
it's basically random, isn't it? A random selection of large holders of the coin who are set up as validators, I guess they call them, on a proof of stake network. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how exactly the whole validation process works on proof of stake. But I think the idea is that that's going to be important for this discussion. Those who have a greater stake, that is, they own an amount of the token or coin, let's say, have a percentage of influence on the entire network. So someone with more stake has more influence on the network than someone with less stake.
Yeah, my understanding is basically if you're holding a 10% stake, then basically you would have a 10% chance of being randomly selected. Well, it's not totally random. Since it's based on your stake, basically your odds of being selected to forge the next block are based on how much stake you're holding as a validator. So it's an interesting concept because holding that stake doesn't require any work.
Right.
Although in a sense it requires previous work to have acquired that amount of tokens, I guess you could say.
But the reward that you get doesn't necessarily require a continuing expenditure of that work. And this is something really unique with Bitcoin or a proof of work, is that you have to, when you expend that energy and solve that problem, you're not done. At that point, you don't go, well, there, I solved the problem. Now I'm the one that gets the reward. You have to turn around and do it all over again. There has to be a continuing of expenditure of energy to provide proof of the work done to secure the network. So it's a continuing, but where a proof of stake, you kind of, I think of it like a stock. You buy it once and then it's just
a little more passive is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
It's definitely more passive.
And I don't know if this might be too early in the discussion to bring this up, as I think it's more of a final point, but it's that this idea of passive income is a pretty modern thing. And everybody looks to it as a good thing, but I'm not sure in the big scheme of things that it is.
Okay, I guess because you're detached from having to create a good or provide a service. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, and usually what's being created by it is something from nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to add that to the discussion. Was I heard someone, because with all this Ethereum moving to proof of stake versus proof of work, some people who are very pro POW, proof of work. It's actually, side note, it's kind of funny that proof of stake is also POS. But anyway, they talked about how, you know, with proof of work, you have value being added and gained because there is that expenditure of energy. So that's what gives it value. That's what gives something that's proof of work value, versus proof of stake, which is essentially taking from the future to give the coins, like tokens, out of thin air. And I'm completely butchering how that was stated, but it really made sense when they laid it out, at least when I listened to it. And I can't remember who it was to give credit to them, but that whole sort of concept of how can it have value if there's not been any work expended or energy expended to create this thing that's supposed to have value. So like, where does proof of stake derive its value from? Because at some point there had to be some work to create something, but like, is that not the fiat system? It's just like,
right.
Here we go, here's a bunch more money.
Yeah.
How does that, well, I mean, we see it, the inflation, quote unquote.
Well, in proof of stake, at least you have to like physically and publicly put up a collateral, so that if you cheat, you lose your collateral. So I would say that's an improvement over the political system. You don't see them putting up any collateral. I would embrace that, a proof of stake for our politicians.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, okay, let's go down that then. What would that look like as far as a proof of stake for the politicians?
Well, the way I've heard it described is it wasn't necessarily applied to politicians. It was more of anybody who wants to have an opinion on any matter as a quote unquote expert. Is they have to put up some sort of stake that, publicly. And if they are proved wrong, they lose their stake. So that was the kind of the theory behind it, was it has to be put up, and then you basically pay that stake to be considered by society an expert on that matter. And if you are proved wrong, you lose your stake, and the stake is, distributed to the other experts or those who proved you wrong, maybe, but it puts something at stake. I mean, you think of all the people of the last couple of years who basically made these claims, and you think of Fauci and people like that, the experts, quote unquote, and their position changed every 2 weeks, every month.
Right.
Wear masks, don't wear masks, wear masks in schools. Well, now we don't need that. Like, just as an example, but that, I mean, the what we were being told changed all the time. And those are the people were looking to be experts. But if they had something at stake where they actually were proved to be wrong in what they were telling people as quote unquote the expert, they probably would consider their position a little bit more carefully. There would be less politics involved in, public policy.
Right. Be a matter of who has the highest stake and whether or not they're the biggest expert.
Well, I think that it would require truth, because nobody wants to lose their stake.
Exactly,
You know what I mean?
especially if it's substantial.
That's right. And so in a proof of stake, when it comes to crypto, you don't really lose your stake, I guess, if you don't have the biggest one. But that's not what it's about. When with that sort of a what you're asking about, how it would work with politicians or what have you, their truth is actually being verified.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, of course, opens up a whole different kettle of fish, because in certain areas like science and things like that, what we know to be true does change over time.
Mm-hmm.
The whole statement, the science is settled, is a completely unscientific statement. Because the science is never settled. That's the entire point of science. Yep. So anyway, we're kind of a little off track of our crypto corner here. But
this is actually interesting. I was trying to figure out a mechanic, like how a system like that would work. It's like, if we're not making them put up a personal collateral, perhaps we tie the funding to how well people view their performance. If you get to cut off funding to any particular department, that's kind of the idea of more, I guess, voluntarism in tax paying and earmarking where your taxes go, so that you get to say, well, that department is actually providing services, competently. So it's like, I'm okay with giving them my income tax, but it's like these ones are performing very badly. So that could be one spin on it.
The challenge there, of course, is the idea is then who's determining the truth. Right? And this, I think, is where that idea breaks down a little bit. Just because at one time we could trust certain, entities to be telling us the truth, and now that's much harder. There really would have to be a completely rebuilding of the system, some sort of check and balance in place to do that. The truth that Bitcoin provides us, though, is pretty much immutable, because there is no person or entity in the background saying this is truth, this is not truth. Bitcoin simply runs. Bitcoin's very agnostic in that way. Whereas something that's more centralized, like a proof of stake token, usually the people who created it, and a lot of these shitcoins, have the largest stake, because they gave themselves millions of them before they released it to the general public.
That's one of the better arguments I've heard for Bitcoin versus Pirate Chain, is that sheer amount of truth, right? Because with the shielding and the invisibility of balances in Pirate Chain, you can't actually see the amount. So the argument was used for Bitcoin versus Monero, but it would be very similar as far as Pirate Chain, because Pirate Chain is even more shielded than Monero. So because with Bitcoin you can actually see the amounts, it then lends itself to the very quick detection of like inflation bugs or things like that. And the example that they used was an older, what was that coin? There was a coin that it was an older one, and essentially what it was is it might have been what is it? Bitcoin Dark, Bitcoin something like that. Like it was a hard fork of Bitcoin that went like a shielded, invisible sort of blockchain route, or shielded invisible transactions route, and then come to find out the people who forked it and created it put in an inflation bug, gave themselves a whole bunch of this coin, and then the inflation bug wasn't actually detected until they tried to get the coin, try to get the money out, the actual the dividends from cheating the system in that way. Yeah. So that was the argument against a shielded or private transaction amount. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but it all came out.
I guess it really does center around truth. I mean, when we look at even just our current commercial banking system, we're relying on them to be, I guess, the umpires or the record keepers, at least, of the truth. It's like who has what value, and right. Are they legitimately trading back and forth? Making sure that somebody else isn't sending your money. And so when we want to do a comparison of proof of work and proof of stake, what we really want to know is which one is going to be the most accurate and immutable. I think that word immutable is what we're going to come back to, an immutable record of the truth. And proof of stake, I just see it as more vulnerable because we see with wealth imbalances, I mean, so to say, 50% of a coin network, then how many people might hold 50% of it? And that would, in a proof of stake blockchain, that would give them, I'm not 100% sure if that would give them full control. I know with Bitcoin, we talk about the 51%, but that's not simply by virtue of owning 51% of Bitcoin. You could own 51% of Bitcoin and it wouldn't get you anything.
No.
You would need to run 51% of the proof of work.
Yeah, you'd have to have 51% of the miners. Mm-hmm. And even then, you'd have to maintain that.
Yeah. Because as you mentioned earlier, right, it's not just a one and done expend. No, you got to do it again and again and again, and keep running it in a continuous cycle of trying to solve the next problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just see it. Yeah. Again, proof of stake systems, it seems like there's a lot of risk of them becoming very lopsided. I mean, if we look at global wealth numbers, it's something like the top 10% of people in the world hold 85% of the wealth. So if you had that sort of thing in a proof of stake system, I can't see it continuing to be as immutable. I mean, we've talked about that with fiat. There's a lot of incentive to, instead of maintaining a completely trustworthy record of accounts, to simply expand the supply or do different things that give you an advantage.
Right. Well, I think this is where proof of stake ties back to fiat and starts to actually look a lot like fiat. Eventually, you can get to a point where if you control the money printer in fiat, right, you can, I guess, if you have, which would be equated to power. So if you hold the power in government, you control, for fiat, the creation of money. There's other things about money that you can control, interest rate, things like that. And you have the potential in a proof of stake system. This maybe is a simplistic look at it, where you potentially could have those quote unquote in power, those who hold the most stake, actually being able to edit the record or inflate the amount, or any other number of things potentially to control control that in a negative way, which would thereby give them, and people naturally will then give themselves more power and more wealth at the expense of those further down the totem pole.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is it's not something that should be taken for granted, that just because proof of stake uses less energy, that it's a better system. It's something that really needs to be considered on a deeper level.
Yeah, and this I think is where I kind of wanted to go with this discussion originally. Was this whole idea that work is not bad and the expenditure of energy is not bad. And we do this day in and day out and never really think about it. But if you had a carpenter come and say, hey, I can replace your roof for you. Well, you would pay him for the work he puts in. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't pay him for the number of nails he owns or the amount of roofing he owns. You know, you would pay him for the amount of roof that he puts on. Yep. Right. So this idea of I go to work and expend energy, my life force, my time, essentially is what that is. That is a proof of work. Mm-hmm. And in the money system, it's no different. In Bitcoin, it's no different. The expenditure of the energy is key to making the system equitable.
Yep.
You know, and
I was just going to say that's just another aspect to love about Bitcoin is that when you look at, excuse me, when you look at how just the general expenditure of energy day in, day out at a job or whatever, and that job pays you in a fiat dollar that is constantly being inflated. And, you know, when you really pare it down, what's happening is your energy, your time, your effort, your expenditure of work is being stolen from you. Like the value of your life, the time that you're like, and maybe we've kind of touched or danced around it as well, but like, you know, time is the most finite resource we have. Then Bitcoin, then like, you know, that's often a Maxis make an argument the Maxis make, but like it made me mad when I kind of realized it. And to be able to put an expenditure of my life force, my energy, my time into something that is not being stolen from me can be verified to be true. It's a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. It's equal for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it really goes back to a value for value type exchange. I mean, in your analogy of the carpenter, it's very clear there.
Yep.
The value is being provided and the exchange is made. Money for work accomplished. And I think that's kind of the ideal as I see it, that the world should be dominated by value for value exchanges. That's how we all benefit, through mutually beneficial exchange.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
and I think that's how you build true wealth too.
Yes.
Because
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If the reward for holding a stake is the creation of wealth, not the gaining, but the creation, not the earning, but the poof, here's some more wealth in an inflationary type of way. Well, that's the problem we have with fiat. But if you can actually do something that does a transfer, that's very equalizing, because now it's not just, well, I have money, therefore I can easily transfer it from other people or create it myself. But if you simply can say, I can work and I can work hard and initiate some of that transfer of wealth to myself, that's very equalizing, because humanity can do that without being born with a silver spoon.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part of a sustainable system, is that you can't have one where simply by virtue of accumulating wealth, then you get to make the rules and you get to, I guess, you get to stop prioritizing exchanging value and you simply use your wealth to become the authority. And then it's not about value for value exchange, it's about authority simply dictating.
So if you're listening to this on Fountain or Breeze or another value for value platform, and you found some value from it, send us some value. But it's almost kind of sad when I think about how little I actually thought about how a proof of stake worked, because, like with your analogy, Owen, of a carpenter, right? Like something like that is that's so everyday normal in our life. And, granted, it's been just with fiat dollars. And again, I hadn't thought about the, Bitcoin as a battery or life force energy, whatever. Like life force energy, man, that life force energy sounds kind of hokey pokey, but anyway.
Yeah, it does. I always hate saying it. Every time I say it, I'm just a little bit of cringe because I'm like, oh, I sound really new agey and mystical.
But it's, it's a time battery, right?
That's right.
It's a time battery, and you want a battery that doesn't leak. Thank you, Mr. Spirko, for that analogy. You want a battery that doesn't leak and is going to be efficient, and that's what we get with Bitcoin. But to get back to what I was trying to say is, I'm so used to, or we as humanity are so used to, I guess for the longest time, we were so used to just, if you worked, you were rewarded in a certain way. Like there was no reward without work. And now we're in a place in time where he with the most gets the most, and it's not equal or equitable. Like, I mean, I'm calling,
gotta have money to make money.
Well, the golden rule, right?
That's right.
Who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, I think it's funny though how, society, there wouldn't be a single person that you would run into that would say, I shouldn't get paid for my day job, for the work I put in. It's just an understanding. That's what people have jobs for. I go, I put in this time, I do this thing that has value for somebody, and I get paid direct, or my company gets paid and they pay me. But then we turn around to our investments and our monetary system and say, well, we should just create this out of thin air for some reason. Like there's a disconnect there between those two aspects of society that I think is kind of funny that we don't carry that across through everything.
No, it was disconnect for me. It was kind of just there, and it kind of took looking at how Bitcoin, and even not just Bitcoin, but like proof of work, and thinking a bit more deeply about life in general and how I go about things day to day, and the time that I spend and looking at what value I put in just the day-to-day activities and how that is rewarded. It took that to really kind of remove the disconnect and reconnect it and realize that we're in a pretty broken system, and this, that's part of why this podcast is named The Changing Normal, is because the normal is broken. We're trying to fix it with proof of stake. It's not working. Well, okay, it's working for the people with the higher stakes and the larger stakes, but
right, which is the same, but that's the same as this fiat system now.
Yeah, there's going to be a point where it's going to reach an end. It's got to. I'm speculating at that with that statement, but come on, it's got to. Like, there's been so many people over the last 2 years kind of wake up and realize and come to terms with sort of what is and what's happening and what isn't working anymore. That's why homesteading, quote unquote, is a fad, but it's a fad that's going to last because people are realizing the true value that's there in that system of putting your hand to the plow and actually getting work done instead of whatever, sitting around waiting for the silver spoon to feed you.
Yeah, or waiting for the distant human authorities to fix the problem that the human authorities have caused. Definitely, that's hitting right back at the theme of what we're trying to do here.
Even if it's just putting the bug in someone's ear. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, that's right. Like, just planting seeds. Wouldn't well, I guess planting seeds isn't news to you guys. It's a little bit more news to me, but we do have some interesting news sort of things been going on. I guess so. This morning, actually, do you guys have anything else you want to add on kind of our crypto corner / main topic? I guess that's just kind of rolled.
I think that was a good wrap up point. Definitely something we'll probably build on later on. Yeah.
The monarch of Great Britain and the UK, and I guess technically Canada, because she's on our $20 bills. Queen Elizabeth II passed away today. So that's, what do you say? Our condolences to the royal family.
Well, I'm sure they listen.
Oh, 100%. Where's
man,
the
I have a hard time
podcast?
seeing how I need to care about this. That's where I'm at. I did tune into CBC briefly, but it was just such total fluff.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it till this afternoon, actually. So somebody had mentioned it in passing, and I went, "Wait, what?" It's interesting. There is, I think, in most of the Commonwealth, a lot of people, I think, would feel a little bit of, I don't want to say connection, but like I think innately in people,
recognition.
There's a recognition. There's a little bit. There's always been this natural love for the royal family. It's especially strong in the UK, obviously, but I think everywhere in the Commonwealth, because we still do have that formalized connection to the English royal family. Whether not that they have any real say, practically speaking, in the passing of laws and all of those things. We still have something that's technically called a royal assent, for laws passed in Canada that every bill has to go through, but it's basically a rubber stamp, at this point. But I do think there's a certain connection that people have with that, and a certain love for the monarch. I think it's an interesting thing to kind of discuss or to be introspective about and think, why do I feel this way? Mm-hmm. People die every day. Obviously, this is, a very famous person. She's the second longest reigning monarch in history. It's kind of a big deal. Most of the people that are alive today, she was queen for, she was queen for that time period. So most of us have never known another monarch as far as the British Commonwealth. And probably you couldn't name too many other monarchs around the world. Like, name another monarch. Like, there's not many left. Like, there are still monarchs out there, but they're few and far between, and half the time they're, dictators who simply call themselves a king. Right? So it's kind of a rarity. I guess I see it as kind of a throwback to a previous time, a previous era where monarchy was the predominant method of governance. I think there's an argument to be made for the fact that it was potentially a superior form of governance to quote unquote democracy. I know we throw democracy around as like being the be all and end all of how to govern, but I'm not convinced of that it's the best way of governing. I'm not sure I'm prepared to make an actual argument for that, more than just the statement and, broad strokes. So I'm sure that all of those things are sort of mixed together in a person when they hear this sort of news. To me, two things pass through my head. As far as international news for your UK news, earlier this week, Boris Johnson stepped down, and maybe not earlier this week, but the new prime minister of the UK took power or whatever. And she made basically a statement saying, whether she's a politician, so who knows what's going to actually happen, but basically made the statement, Britain has resources. This entire concept of starving ourselves for climate change is baloney. So it was kind of a statement towards, we need to create economic change. We need to utilize the resources to do that. And it was pretty strong. Obviously the whole idea of energy crisis in Europe right now is a pretty big deal with the war in Russia, Ukraine, and all that. So it was kind of a move to say, we need to move back to being more, less energy dependent. And we need to get our economy turned around so that we're not so, weak, I guess is a statement. It was a pretty conservative statement. Let's put it that way. That kind of dismissed a lot of the woke climate change stuff narrative that's in most countries right now.
That's good to hear. I generally just roll my eyes when climate change comes around.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Obviously we'll see what happens with it. And, it's one statement, so currently the new king, Charles III, is a rather active pro-climate change supporter. Cool. So it will be interesting to see how that, I know the monarch, it's kind of a figurehead position at this point, but it'll be interesting to see if those two things clash and how that will play out in the UK as far as policy making. So that's kind of a long-winded way of commenting on it, but those were the two things that kind of popped into my head and go, I wonder how this is going to play out. Is the UK going to kind of get itself straightened around and get itself going in the right direction again, and maybe sort of rise as a power again in the world?
Lead Europe out of the dark ages they're headed towards?
Well, I don't know if that's possible at this point, but
who knows? Saskatchewan made the news for a second week in a row on our show. Unfortunately, this was a fair bit more dire. There was 11 people killed and 19 injured. There was a stabbing spree and then an ensuing manhunt. So the individual.
You have to fill me in. You have to fill me in on this because I didn't hear anything about this.
So I heard about it while we were working on our literal blockchain over the weekend. But Basically, it was just a like heard it in passing, and then I kind of researched it today on what happened. There was just one fallout. He started near Rosthern, Saskatchewan. I think is where they located him, but basically he just started going around and killing people with a knife. And anyway, it was where we at here? It occurred on Sunday was when the stabbing spree was, but like apparently he's been charged with 3 counts, first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of break and enter. And the fellow that they had actually went into medical distress after they arrested him. And I'm not really sure what exactly happened. There's nothing in this. I mean, it's CTV that's got the main article that I was reading, but it's anyway, it just it's really kind of heartbreaking to think about it, and it's also quite aggravating because when people snap and get in their head that they're going to cause harm to other individuals, they're going to use whatever means necessary to get that done. And it doesn't matter what you do to ban the conventional means of harm, the individual is going to figure it out. So now we have a ban on handguns, anything, you know, the level of firearms that's restricted here in Canada is even tighter. So what are we going to do now? Ban knives? Like they did it in the UK.
Like that is what's coming.
That's where my mind goes on something like that, is because there's just something like, you know, human beings have a great capacity for positive outcomes, but we also have this immense capacity for doing massive amounts of harm to our fellow human beings. And it's just, I don't know, it's just hard to wrap my head around that someone did something like that, but also it makes me nervous for what this is going to bring down the tubes as far as what they're going to say we can and can't do.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a concern, obviously outside of our control, but it is something to be aware of. I think the lesson I take from these sorts of scenarios is, and obviously you don't know the scenario, every single one of those encounters with this person and how it went down, but a couple things you should take away from it. Situational awareness is king.
Yep.
The idea that this person was willing and had the ability to use violence shouldn't be a shock to us. I think our society is so sheltered, and we have lived in a safe, quote unquote, safe society for so long that we don't know what violence even looks like. So then when we encounter it, we don't know how to react.
Right.
And so this idea that violence equals evil becomes the pervasive thought in society. But that's not actually accurate. You can have violence done for good reasons. Someone who would enact violence upon a person going around trying to stab people, that act of violence would have been a good act of violence.
That's true.
right? If the police roll up and shoot someone who's killing people, we don't say that act of violence was also evil.
Well,
We say that was a good act of violence, you know? Or if someone tries to stab you and you defend yourself and punch them in the face and knock them out, that act of violence is a good act of violence because you acted in self-defense and stopped someone who was going around stabbing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a interesting. I think as men, especially, we need to examine ourselves and say, do we have the capacity for violence? Should we have the capacity for violence? And having that capacity for violence is not in and of itself evil, but the restraining of using that violence for evil is what is good. Right. And so that to me is the lesson you take away from that scenario. And from a preparedness side of, point of view, obviously you go, am I prepared to enact violence at a moment's notice in self-defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's I think one thing we need to take away. Am I practicing situational awareness, and conditioning my mind to be aware of my surroundings so that in this scenario, I'm not caught off guard, when some lunatic with a knife decides to come around.
Right.
But that's hard as a society. Like we just so divorced from that in society. Violence is both celebrated and yet condemned all at the same time. The movies, computer games, all of that violence is celebrated as a wonderful, like everybody loves a movie where, the good guy goes on a killing spree and takes down all the bad guys. Right.
So celebrated and glamorous, but not for you to do. That's for entertainment purposes only.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see some parallels here, with the framing of violence and the framing of energy usage as well. In both cases, it seems like it's a bad thing for an individual to engage in. And it's definitely something that should be monopolized under the umbrella of bureaucratic control.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that for sure is the view of government. Is this idea that, and they do have a monopoly on violence. They're the only ones who can do it and not pay some sort of penalty or price for it.
Interesting.
Yep, definitely the nature of any organization, and government is, of course, one of the largest of organizations. It's that desire to accumulate more and more power.
Interesting.
It's kind of part of the discussion going on in Russia around crypto at the moment. It's interesting seeing some of the recent stories. They've kind of been hot and cold, gone from, well, maybe we'll ban it to maybe we'll legalize it within a registered banking structure to, well, we need it for trade now that we don't have all the international banking systems. And so where they're at now is they definitely seem to be leaning towards embracing it for international payments. And it will probably be a stable coin that they'll try to build payment systems around, not Bitcoin. But they also seem like they do not want cryptocurrencies interrupting the ruble as the domestic currency of trade. So it seems like they're definitely going to discourage crypto being used Russian to Russian, basically domestically. But internationally, they've got no choice. They've got to get some more things rolling to enable trade.
Yeah, I remember hearing rumblings about this. Maybe it was when it was hot and then it went cold again. Back a while ago when, they started imposing sanctions on Russia because of the war in Ukraine. And they're like, well, we're just going to start taking Bitcoin for oil and all this sort of stuff. And then it kind of fizzled out. Actually, in the article that kind of sparked our pirate chain and Bitcoin discussion, they talk about how in Argentina is actually suppressing people from, like, if you bought Bitcoin, you can't actually buy US dollars. And
You're saying you can't legally exchange Bitcoin for US dollars?
Kind of in a roundabout way. So it's basically just trying to stop US dollars from leaving Argentina. Where's the quote here? Those who have bought Bitcoin or any other digital asset in the past 90 days with pesos will not be able to access the single free exchange market, Mercado Único y Libre de Cambio, and buy dollars at the official rate. So basically just trying to go from pesos into Bitcoin into US dollars is what I believe. So, I mean, it's kind of off topic from Russia, but
no, it's another point where a country is really desperately trying to maintain currency controls.
What's interesting about Argentina is they've had currency collapse like 4 or 5 times in the last 50 years or something like that. It's just been a gong show down there.
Yeah, 64%, I think, is the inflation rate, according to their central bank, which is probably higher than 64%.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously, like, we saw it in El Salvador. Like, well, El Salvador is kind of more just recognizing Bitcoin as the better money. But places with inflation, currency collapse, starting to move towards things that are outside, a little bit more outside, or at least the populace is recognizing that, and they're moving to things more outside of what is being utilized as the norm for their country.
Definitely a warning sign when you see governments attempt to restrict movement, either of people or of money. A worst case picture of that is the Berlin Wall. We're gonna put up a big wall and say you can't leave. Definitely try to avoid the money leaving, rather than following that principle of money goes where it's treated best, and making good policy that encourages people, incentivizes people to come to you. You got to throw up hurdles to try and prevent them from running away.
So that's what we've got for you in the news this week. There wasn't much listener feedback. We had some sats boosted to the show by a user on Fountain, and the username is not something recognizable. It's just kind of user dash number letter. So thank you for that.
Okay. Is there ability to send a little message with those? Is that part of the platform? That would be really awesome. Yeah,
that's one of the great things about the value for value and boostograms and things like that. They it's like on Fountain. I mean, there's a boatload of other apps that allow for it, but Fountain and Breeze, the Breeze wallet and the podcast streamer there, those are the two main ways that I've seen it. But it's awesome to be able to, send a bit of value for some value gathered from a show or something like that, and be able to send a message, and then we can also reply to the messages as well and read them out in the show. Being able to give a shout out to folks that are supporting the show. So, but that being said, fountain.fm is one of the best places to listen to podcasts. You can listen to our show, the Changing Normal podcast. You can send us some value for value if you found something valuable, or if you just were entertained. This has been an hour and a half of more or less an open discussion, led off by some interesting banter on some Bitcoin and pirate chain that's not going away anytime soon because they're going to keep pushing that one. And I enjoy it. It's fun. But you can also send feedback through the boostergrams on Fountain or Breeze, but also through email. Our email is changingnormal@protonmail.com. If you'd like, you can check out our landing page. We got, I think it's, what is it? changing-normal-net or something like that.
What?
Because one of them's the WordPress, and one of them is just the blueberry.com. But blueberry.com, BLUBRRY.com/changingnormal.
That one's the easier one. That's the landing
That
page.
was definitely the easier one.
Link over to the WordPress from that landing page if you so desire.
And then that's got a bunch of links. You can head over to Stitcher, Spotify, subscribe via RSS feed. If you so desire, we're on YouTube, Odysee, and we're also on Twitter. As Dan said, I don't really know why we're on there, but changing_normal. Again, the Changing Normal podcast on fountain.fm, where you can earn Bitcoin by listening to us. You can also stream Bitcoin to us or to your other value for value enabled shows. And while you're on one of those platforms, leave us a rating and a review. Let us know what you think. Help us beat those blasted algorithms. And we also accept donations via Lightning URL, and that is changingnormal@fountain.fm. So that, folks, thank you very much for listening if you made it this far. And remember, take small steps, be courageous, and change your normal.